光に燃える星があるなら巨大な敵を撃てよ撃てよ撃てよ正義の光をぶつけろガンダム機動戦士ガンダムガンダム
By the time the Gundam was produced by the Earth Federation Space Forces, the concept of the mobile suit was already well established. However, getting a working prototype to actually beat the Zeon Zaku was much more work than simply building a machine and sending it out. With this soundly in mind, the Federation set out to build a weapon that would crush the Zeon so soundly that the colonies would think twice before trying to rebel again. That machine was the RX-78 Gundam, and it would become known as one of the most dangerous weapons the Earth Federation ever fielded. Using what they had learned from the RX-77 gun cannon, they applied it to their close combat mobile suit. It had lighter armor, but could wield a beam cannon that was on par with the battleships, and its Luna titanium armor could resist the weapons of the Zaku II like a slingshot against a brick wall. One of the major breakthroughs for the Gundam, however, was the extensive use of the energy capacitor in its weapon systems, most notably the beam saber and the beam rifle, similar to the one used by the gun cannon. The beam rifle suffered from critical shortages of energy, which would later be rectified by variants of the Gundam mobile suit like the GP-01 Zephyranthes. These suits had spare energy capacitors, or E-caps, that could be ejected and reloaded like the more conventional machine guns that the mass-production mobile suits carried in the One-Year War. The beam saber was an entirely new beast, however, and projected an eye field in which either superheated plasma or megaparticles were let free. Even on the lowest settings, it was enough to superheat snow into a steam bath, as Ensign Shiro Amada demonstrated with his Gundam ground type. This allowed the beam to saw through anything that wasn't another beam saber or the Zeon heat weaponry. How the Heat Hawk and Heat Swords of the Zeon machines were able to repel the beam weapons are a question for the scholars, but assumedly, they have similar but less refined technology in play. Between all of these fancy new toys, the Gundam was a force to be reckoned with. But the real beauty queen was the learning computer that made the machine as quick and lethal as it was. It collected data as it fought, both on the pilot's reactions and from the machines it battled. Coming into the war as late as it did, it had more than enough data on the Zaku II to keep Amuro Ray alive while he learned how to pilot the machine. Later, however, even the mighty Gundam would be insufficient for the burgeoning new type, which would lead to new developments. In the original novel, the RX-78-2 would be destroyed by Lala Soon, and Amuro would pilot the G3 instead. But before we can play with our hero's kit, we need to examine the forward march of robots fielded by the Duchy of Zeon next episode. What we can speak of is a man who hates the Zabi family more than anyone else. Char Aznable is a man shrouded in mystery. Ace pilot of Zeon, he was never seen without his mask by his peers until the very end of the war, and would find himself in hot water as his plans to kill the Zabis started to come to fruition. Char Aznable was born Caspel or Casper Daikun, a boy who would have to suffer the indignity of seeing his father die at the hands of the Zabis, and his mother's subsequent imprisonment. Even as a boy, he exhibited a killer instinct, and his devilishly sharp mind would send him rocketing up through the ranks. Without speaking too much of the circumstances around it, Char Aznable took command of a Musai battleship and a crack infiltration team at the tender age of 20, and would find infamy from there on. While his portrayal in the original Gundam gave him an almost sympathetic cast, he was willing to sell out a man who he considered a best friend for the sake of revenge. This lust for revenge would see him drummed out of the Zeon army by Dozle Zabi, only for Kashiria Zabi to bring him back as the captain of the Mad Angler Squadron. At the time of the One-Year War, he had only begun to fully grasp his new type abilities, and took to his father's theories about Space Noid independence wholeheartedly. While it was never entirely clear if he was serious about them by the time of the Neo-Zeon Rebellion in 0093, his search for the power of the new type would bring him to the Flanagan Institute and his encounter with the ill-fated Lala Soon. For once in his life, Char had found someone he could be at peace with, and a fateful encounter with Amuro Ray at the end of the war killed something inside of the man for good. Amuro and Char's rivalry was the sort that never much happened outside of their machines, and by the time they first met each other in person, only Char's infamy and distinctive uniform clued the young pilot into his identity. Their battle would only stop when both of them were dead, without question. As a pilot, he was almost without peer. The Zaku they designed for him was made 3 times as fast to better accommodate his supernatural instincts and reflexes, and the mere sight of a red mobile suit on the battlefield brought lesser pilots to their knees in terror. He was particularly skilled at hand-to-hand combat, which served him well against the CQC-oriented Gundam, even though the Red Comet would never quite catch up to the White Devil over the course of the series. But the only thing that he hated more was the zombies, and once they were dealt with, he could destroy the Gundam at his leisure. The best of Zeon's forces were to be the instrument of their destruction, and he would later help to usher in a new era of new-type warfare as the later conflicts of the First Universal Century dragged on. But what is a new type anyway? Find out next time to see who made the list and who didn't.